Today's guest has lived a life most people only dream about and then turned everything he learned into a mission to help the rest of us perform better, feel better, and maybe even sleep better. Gary Miller is an Aspen native, a two-time NCAA skiing champion out of the University of Colorado, and one of the most accomplished alpine ski coaches in America. Over the course of his career with the U.S. ski team, Gary coached at more than 50 World Cup competitions, 3 World Championships, and the Olympic Winter Games, working alongside legends and a young phenom you might have heard of named Mikaela Shiffrin. But Gary's story doesn't stop on the slopes. After decades in elite athletics and a whole lot of frequent flyer miles, he became obsessed with a question that doesn't get asked enough. Why are we so quick to reach for a pill when our bodies are trying to tell us something? That question led him and his wife, Gail, to take a leap of faith, leave the U.S. behind, and plant roots in Garmisch, Germany, home of World Cup ski racing. And as Gary would say, food that actually tastes like food. It was there that he discovered something that's been quietly changing lives in Europe for over a decade, but had never made it to American shores. Enter the human charger, a transcranial bright light therapy device originally developed in Finland that fits around your neck like a Bluetooth headset and delivers 10,000 lux of light directly through your ear canals to your brain in just 12 minutes. We're talking real, science-backed relief from seasonal affective disorder, fatigue, anxiety, jet lag, and more, without a single pill. Gary is now the U.S. distributor, bringing this innovation to American athletes, executives, and anyone ready to stop fighting their own biology. In this conversation, we go beyond just the product. We dive into Gary's journey from the mountains of Aspen to his life in Germany, his insights on pain and modern medicine, and why he believes we've lost touch with some of the most fundamental elements of human health. He's also got a book in the works, a fascinating deep dive into the history of pain from the Vikings to modern day. We also explore how innovation, including AI, can support wellness businesses without ever replacing the human connection at the core of it all. If you have ever struggled with energy, sleep, or simply keeping up with the pace of modern life, this episode is going to open your eyes, literally and figuratively. Welcome to the podcast, Gary. So excited for our conversation today.
Wow. Thank you, Beth. Like I said before, I don't think I've ever had an introduction quite that thorough. And thank you very much for the kind words. I'm pretty well traveled.
Well, you said to me on our first call that you've lived the life of 1,000 kings, which I would agree with, but take us back. How did your journey begin and go from elite skiing and coaching into this health and wellness space?
Wow. Well, it starts, like you said, in Aspen. That's where I was born, in a condemned hospital on Red Mountain. And my mother skied right up until the day she had me. And then after I was born, probably a month later, she was back skiing on the slopes, and she would literally drive the car up to the base of Little Nell, and she would have me in a basket in the back seat of the car. She'd roll down the window a little bit, sunny day. This was in March. And she'd go up and ski, and then she'd swing by the car and take a look in, make sure I was still sleeping, and she'd go up and take another run, and you'd get arrested if you pulled that off today. But that's kind of where it started. I guess skiing was in my blood to a certain degree, but I wanted no part of it as I was growing up as a young kid. My sisters, they loved to go skiing, but I didn't want any part of it. We had moved after 3 years. We moved back to where my father's family had a clothing business, and he was going to take over the family business. And he was a skier, but he was done skiing or competing. And so we moved back there, and they wanted us to go skiing every weekend. And my sisters were gung ho and I wasn't. But my mother was very clever. Okay. She hired the biggest, meanest babysitter you could ever imagine. And after 2 weekends of that, I was begging to go skiing. And
the slopes were a better option than the mean old babysitter, huh?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I kind of got forced into it. And then, as a kid, everyone started to compete, and, all of my friends and my sisters were bringing home medals and trophies, and I had nothing. And I thought, man, I better get with the program, because I'm falling behind. I won't have any friends anymore. So I was kind of forced into it a little bit, but then all of a sudden, the social aspect takes over, and pretty soon you're doing your thing. And from there, it just, I started competing, and I would at 15 years old. I mean, this is unheard of today. You don't see much of this anymore, but it was a different time, right?
Mhm.
So I would go to Argentina in the month of August for the entire month. And because it's winter down there in August, and I would train there for a month. They had ski camps, and I would go to these camps. There were a lot of Americans that went down there, and then I would come back, and beginning of September, jump in school again. But at 15 years old, we didn't have mobile phones and computers and all that sort of stuff. If you wanted to talk to your parents, you talked to them once in a month,
Mhm.
and you would call. I would place the call at the hotel in the morning, and by the time I got back from the ski area at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening, the call would come in.
Wow.
There were no satellites,
Uh-huh.
obviously, so that call just jumped all the way up through Central America, South America, Central America, and of course, there was this massive delay. But we kind of lived this life of, I write about it in my book about pain, that we were raised by wolves, and we could do that kind of stuff and not have fears.
I heard someone of our generation say that our childhood was like one never-ending episode of Survivor, and I thought that was an accurate description.
That is an accurate description.
I'm with you. I think that those were amazing and just carefree days, and we certainly learned a lot during that time about our own motivation, how to handle things ourselves, how to get stuff done. So there was some real beauty to that for sure. But you're right, unheard of in today's day and age for something like that to happen.
Yeah, we tried with our kids to do as much of that as possible. You just obviously in this kind of societal climate, you'd have to be a little more careful.
Mhm.
It was kind of freewheeling it back then, and things have changed, and unfortunately that's the way it is. But we kept them outside, and we kept them in sports, and tried to keep we didn't have the mobile phones and stuff like that until they were starting to get into their teenage years anyway. So we kind of escaped the early onset of that.
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's, that I think it was really important, and one of the things that was really important for me was the travel. Because once you do those types of things, and I did this 4 years in a row, there were some spring high school sports I never played because my father said, "You gotta work at our store to earn some money if you wanna go back down to South America again," and
Mhm.
that was such a big deal to be in another culture, and
Mhm.
to play soccer with little Argentinian kids on a dirt parking lot,
Mm.
and a lot of them were barefoot. I mean, they were poor kids, but it was just that, and eating different foods. It was really fabulous. Couldn't anything.
That wanderlust was instilled at you at a young age,
It
for
was.
sure. So you started your career then skiing, and then how long did you ski competitively, and then when did you switch over to coaching?
I started skiing competitively when I was, I want to say, 10, and I competed through high school, and I was all over the US competing on the national circuit. I think I can't remember how many days of school I missed my junior and senior year, but it had to be close to maybe 50 or 60.
Mhm.
Teachers weren't very happy about that, and of course, I was doing makeup work right until the day I graduated. And then I skied in Europe for a couple years. Then I ended up going to the University of Colorado and skiing for them as a D1 athlete, and that was a fabulous experience. Wouldn't trade that for anything. And I had a back injury. It wasn't really an injury. It was just, I think, the wear and tear. Ski racing is not a very forgiving sport. I mean,
Mhm.
it's brutal on the body. I've had 4 knee surgeries. I've had a disc taken out of my back. I've had an AC joint blown apart. And so I'm kind of, a little baling twine and duct tape together. But that's kind of normal. And I had that bad disc in my back, and I went out to Stanford where my uncle was a surgeon, and had it taken out. And the neurosurgeon says to me, he goes, I asked him, what's my when can I go back and do my sports? And he said, "Well, you can walk and swim." And I said, "Well, okay. Well, how long am I going to do that?" And he says, "For the rest of your life." You shouldn't be going back to skiing or anything like
And how old were you at the time when you got that news?
I was 21.
Well, that wasn't gonna fly, was it?
No, 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 no. I said, "Okay." And then I talked to my uncle about it, and, he's a real athletic guy, and he said, "Nah, don't," "Doctor he's not a sporty kinda guy, so just ignore it, you'll be fine." And I was back water skiing within 6 weeks and full training in another 4 weeks after that, and I was back at CU on the team that fall.
How the young body heals so fast, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you find out that movement and training can remedy a lot of things. But it was years of a lot of competing in tough conditions and icy slopes and things like that you just parts wear out. And
Mhm.
so you fix it and you move on. And that's kind of always been my sort of mud. And I've gotten away with maybe a lot more than a lot of other people. I mean, you look at Lindsey Vonn, what happened to her in Cortina at the Olympics, and she's gonna have some serious issues with that leg for a while, uh,
Mhm.
if not for the rest of her life. So, there are a lot of people that have way worse injuries than I do, but that's just the nature of sport, right?
And so then when did you make the shift into actually coaching?
It wasn't too long after that. I drifted around a little bit, kinda not knowing what I was gonna do. I sort of as a young kid, I was supposed to go back to Wisconsin and run the family business. I would have been the 4th generation. It was a business my great-grandfather started, but God, I'd been traveling for most of my life from 15 through 23, and I just couldn't see myself in a little small town running a clothing business that changed over time too. You know,
Mhm.
this was in a time period when malls were starting to sprout up.
Mhm.
I think the business climate was a little more difficult for a specialty store like my father's and the families. And I had to do something different. So I bounced around a little bit, and then I got an offer from my old coach at the University of Colorado, who moved on to the national team, and he always looked after his guys. And he called me and asked me, and I started out as a talent scout for a couple of years, and then he asked me to come and coach the team. And then I ended up with the men's downhill team, the speed team, and I did that from '83 through the Olympics in Calgary in '88, and I was pretty burnt out by then. It's a hard job. Any coaching job at that level requires an enormous amount of time, and right. I mean, that's
Mhm.
I don't care if it's a football world or a smaller minor sport like ski racing. It's a grind.
Mhm.
And, so I did that for a while, and then I moved to California. I had a girlfriend at the time that lived in LA, and that was another wild episode, and I ended up working on I got this crazy job doing product placement for Amblin Productions making Back to the Future 2. And, so it was working there with Spielberg's group but and it was fascinating, but I was bored out of my
Mhm.
skull. It just, filming is a long ordeal. And then I ended up with a friend, kind of a childhood friend who I grew up ski racing with a bit from the Midwest. We took some extreme skiers over to Europe and filmed them jumping off of cliffs and doing stuff that entertains people. And
Most normal people don't.
yeah, most normal people don't. And in fact, and I did that for a few years, and then we went back down to Argentina and filmed down there. Yeah, and then I sort of got in the business world, and I started working for a guy in Denver that had a business making sports bags and luggage. A little bit, out of my sort of league a little bit, but it tapped into a creative side of me that I didn't really know existed. And I would develop this stuff, and I handled the sports side of things. So I was making it for ski companies and other sporting companies. I would design their bags and luggage, and I would have it manufactured overseas. So I was, instead of going to Europe, I was going to Asia
Mhm.
3 4 times a year to work with the factories. And I did that for 20 years, believe it or not. And in the meantime, you got married and raised a couple kids, and I didn't ski much during that time. And then as they got older, we wanted to get them in a ski program because both of us grew up skiing, and so that's how we ended up starting our own ski program in Michigan at a ski resort called Boyne.
Very familiar with that. Yes, I've been there a few times myself
Yeah,
being
okay,
a
yeah, so
girl.
yeah, so we developed a ski program for Boyne Highlands, and I wanted to do something that was really different.
Mhm,
Okay, not like all these ski racing programs, the kids run gates all the time, the
mhm.
slalom gates, and I wanted to do something that built their skills. So it was all based on sort of drills and games, and this thing grew like crazy. After we did that for about 3 years, and it got to the point where I couldn't get enough coaches. So, going into year 4, I said, we're gonna have to do something a little different. And then I ended up getting a call again from my old coach, and he said, "Hey, I know what you're doing back there with these young kids, and we need you on the national team again to do development." And I'm like, great. So we ended up moving to Park City, Utah, where they're based. I don't know. I get out there, and well, my old coach was leaving that position. He was retiring. And actually, one of the athletes that I had in Calgary, Tiger Shaw, was taking over. Tiger, he said, "Hey, listen, I don't have anything in development, but we need coaches for the other events." So I'm like, he says, "Do you mind going back on the World Cup again?" And I said, well, I really didn't have plans to do that, but yeah, if you need coaches, so. And I ended up with the women. I ended up with three gals: Mikaela Shiffrin, Paula Molson, and Racy Stiegler, and it was fantastic as a coaching job to be able to have athletes like that were so good.
Mhm.
My guys were good back in the '80s. I mean, they were fantastic. There were two Olympic champions out of that group, but the ladies were exceptional. And it's funny because one of the reasons I got the job was because I was a father of a daughter of a similar age. That was really key to Michaela's mother. That was really important.
That you understood, like, what her daughter was experiencing and what her level of maturity was as a young girl and all that stuff. Yeah.
Huge, huge. You cannot, I emphasize this to everybody, you cannot coach boys the same way as you coach girls.
Well, kudos to her mom for recognizing the importance of that and aligning with that.
Well, she came by that a little bit naturally because when Michaela became part of the team, the national team, she was pretty hot when she came in.
Mm,
She started winning at a very young age, and it didn't sit well with the veterans.
mm,
And she was picked on a bit.
mm.
And mom basically went to the coaching staff and said, either you fix that or I'm going to become a permanent fixture. And she did. They didn't do much to help out. So she decided to travel with her, and she's been with her ever since. But yeah, no, that was I feel very fortunate because most coaches would absolutely kill to have one athlete that would win one World Cup race, not seven.
And you had 7? I was gonna
Seven
say how
World Cup wins, a
wow.
world championship medal, a World Cup title, and then obviously she's gone on to be the winningest ski racer on the planet, men or women, and win 3 Olympic gold medals. So no, it's crazy, and it was a really good experience. But being the wily old vet, and by this time, I'm pretty far down the road from when I was coaching the men. I wish I would have had the knowledge that I had when I was with the ladies, because it's the little finite details that matter,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, I think we see that in skiing. Well, it matters in every sport, but especially in skiing and racing, where it can be hundredths of a second that separate the winner. How important those little, even, and my guy was a football player, but he always says, it's a game of inches.
It
And
is.
that's a much different feel than the ski racing. But when you're talking about that level, it is all of every little detail can make the difference.
You know, when you get to that level, all these athletes, they're physically strong,
Hmm.
okay? They've got years under their belt.
Hmm.
Technically, they're pretty similar, and it's up here that it starts to take over. So even though, when I was with the ladies, I didn't have to do a lot of technical coaching. It was more some of the little details. Michaela had some issues in some of her slalom turns where she was losing some integrity at the center of the turn. And when I found out the types of ski that she was skiing on, it took me 2 weeks to convince her and her mom that, you should be on a race ski, which is a handmade, laid up ski that's not what you would buy off the rack at a ski store. And their excuse was, well, she's always just used those and it's been fine. And it's like, but that doesn't work at this level. And it was, finally they agreed after a couple of weeks. And I went to her ski company and I said to the tech, she is a tech rep that prepares all her skis. And I said, make 6 pair of skis this way and bring them and we'll test them over Christmas. And took a day of, she must have made 20 runs on using the various different skis and couldn't believe the difference. She was doing things with her boots that were compromising some of the integrity. So we changed that. It's those little things. And you actually you're more of a psychiatrist than you are anything else. You got to keep them happy here so that everything else flows because their lives are very, very complicated at that level. It's just crazy.
And so then what took you from coaching to where you are now?
Oh, the kids are grown, they're off on their own. And it was like, escape. Let's go somewhere. I had always had a deep desire to live in Europe, and we came over here, and we wanted to give it a try, and we were in Austria, and we ran into an old colleague of mine. I used to build some little bags for his cosmetic stuff that he had a cosmetic business, and it was fairly successful. And I would make a lot of his bags, and so we ran into him again. We've always stayed in touch. And he said, I want to introduce you to this guy. And he's got a product that's never been in the U.S. before. And I said, okay, that's great. And so Gail and I sat down and with him and had a beer in Lech, Austria. And he brought out this funky little device called the Human Charger. And we were pretty intrigued. And my wife knew he was talking about the device being used for seasonal depression. And I didn't really know, or they called it SAD, right? Seasonal affective disorder. I didn't know anything about SAD. Okay. But my wife did. She said, oh, I know about that. And she has, touches of ADHD, and she's never been great getting up in the morning. And Thomas, one of the owners of the Human Charger, said, well, try it. And of course, then I started looking into the science of it and finding out what, light does to our bodies. And I felt like, oh God, this is a component that I've been missing for a long time, especially in the sports world, when I discovered what light would do. I didn't understand that light had such a big impact on your circadian rhythm, your body clock, your internal clock that runs, right? Activates the hormones. So the more I got into it, the more my head is going, wow, God, on a cloudy day with some of my athletes, God, this might really help them. And, the more I got into it. And of course, my wife after a week was like, I've never been able to get up in the morning like I do. And now I have more sustained energy. And it was pretty interesting. And they didn't have anybody to distribute in the US. So after 2 weeks, we said, we'll do it. We'll take it. And it wasn't, I think it was the day after that meeting with the owner, he gave us a few units to try. And I took 2 of the units and I gave them to a doctor friend and his wife that were over, and they were from Denver. And he was a wellness doctor. And he says, I got patients that would love something like this. So we each gave him a unit. They flew back to the US. He calls me a few days later and he goes, my God, I can't believe it. We had no jet lag. And I said, well, the owner did mention that they found that jet lag, people didn't have many symptoms with jet lag. And I'm thinking, oh my God, that's a game changer. That's huge. God, all the flying I've done over the years, I'd have killed for something like this. Because you never really know. You never really know when you fly. Sometimes I would have it really bad. Sometimes I wouldn't have it so bad. Kind of depends on the situation, but there's nothing really, you can't take any medications to fix jet lag. People say, you can take melatonin at night, or you can do this or that. But, when you fly 6, 7 time zones and you land that morning, like typical from the US to Europe, man, you're sucking wind for 2 days. You just don't feel good. So we tried it and couldn't believe it.
Yeah. So let's dig a little bit into the science of this. So here's
good. All right.
I've been, I just wanted to speak about my own experience with it so far. So I got it, I don't know, maybe less than 2 weeks ago. It's been last week and a half, and actually was there on my doorstep on an afternoon. And I know that the suggestion was to use it first thing in the morning, but I was antsy. and a little, sometimes I have that afternoon dip and I go for the second cup of coffee and I know that I shouldn't because then I know then that's going to keep me awake more at night. But I said, let's give this a whirl. So I used these instead. I'm just going to show everyone how simple, right side. And I found out that there is a right and a left side. So make sure the right side is where you put it on. Just put it in your ears. Just that simple. Turn it on and wear it for 12 minutes. So I did that let me turn that off, afternoon. And now it's at my bedside. So first thing in the morning when I wake up, I just look really quick to see the weather, what my schedule is. And then I put my phone down and I put my 12 minutes on with my, and sometimes I get up. I'm not a jump right out of bed person, but sometimes I'll get up and just start doing the things. And I also wear an Oura ring. I've been tracking my sleep, started wearing this since Christmas. I got it. And I have to say, honestly, and we can even look at my Oura ring stats. Since I've been using this, my sleep score has been so much better every single night. And I think part of that is it's helping me get my circadian rhythm back. That's been a little bit of a buzz. For me, I've heard about it the past few years, get out in the morning, get morning sun in your eyes. If you can even get barefoot on the ground, it's even better to do that, but it's not always practical. And I live in Michigan, and I tell you what, in January, I'm not doing that. And in February and March, most of the time here. As much as I would love to do that, it's not as practical. So to have that option to just get that same effect. So let's talk first about the importance of the circadian rhythm. And there was a quote from some information that you sent me, and this is from Dr. Jeffrey Hall, who, oh, by the way, was the winner of the 2017 Nobel Prize in Medicine for work on circadian rhythm. So he probably knows what he's talking about. And he said, circadian rhythm influences everything from hormone levels to behavior to sleep and metabolism. They are as fundamental as breathing. And I don't think that he's overstating that there. As you know, also, obviously, our bodies evolved for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, sun up to sundown. That's what we woke up when the sun came up and we went to sleep when the sun came down. And then a couple hundred years ago, the light bulb came around and threw things off a little bit for us. But I would venture to say that most of us realize probably the last decade plus especially with the iPhone. I mean, computers were bad enough in TVs, but we weren't typically taking those to our bed at night and having them right there handy. So the disruption that we are facing as a society from that moving away from how our bodies were designed and evolved for who knows how long, for real. It's been a massive change and disruption the last 200 years, but particularly in the last decade, accelerated way faster than we can keep up with that. So to have something that can help us reset that, and like you said, it's not just a pill, something that we can use. But let's talk a little bit about the light through the ears, because when I first heard that, I thought, well, that seems crazy. We're all obviously familiar, light coming into our eyes, but the science really says that it's actually a more efficient way to get to the parts of our brain, and that we have receptors not just through our eyes, but receptors all over our brain. And this is a faster way to actually get it there.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I mean, and today it's been exacerbated by blue light, right? Blue light devices. I mean, we've evolved as humans to a certain degree since 1700s, 1800s, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not very quickly, really. I mean, we're essentially, I like to say we're running 21st century software in a 1,000-year-old operating system.
Mm-hmm.
And that we're just, in the last probably 40, 50 years, when we were kids, we got up in the morning and out we went and did our thing. And when it got dark at night, we'd come home and go to bed. We might read a book or something like that. Now, and you've got all these kids that are, they're under the sheets with their iPhones and they're scrolling, and, it's disrupting a lot of our sleep patterns. And, so it was really interesting because when I started to really dive into the science of it, it made complete sense. It's because light cues are really the only thing that can affect your circadian rhythm. You can't do it. And so when the engineer and the scientist from Nokia, that's where these guys came from. Nokia was in Finland. It's It's dark winters, and they broke away and decided, let's come up with something better than the SAD lamps that people would have to stare at literally 6 inches away from their face for an hour. We don't have that kind of time today,
Right.
and it's not really that fun a thing to do anyway. So
Mhm.
these guys did their studies, and like you said, they came up with, they figured that light can go through the skull, but when they looked at the ear canal, because your eardrum is translucent and the bone structure around your ear is a lot thinner, light can penetrate into the hypothalamus, which controls your, I call them the Fantastic Four, your hormones. That light will kickstart your cortisol in the morning that gives you that spike, versus walking outside and staring at the sun, which isn't that great for you either. But naturally, people will get that up better on a sunny day. And then obviously, when at night, you don't want to have light because you want melatonin to kick in.
Mhm.
So that's why you wouldn't use it at night. You would only use it during the daylight hours. It all started to come together and make sense. And then, I got a little bit further into the science, and then they were doing studies with the Finnish pro hockey teams, and they found that in arenas, which only have about 1,500 lux of light on a good day, that's if it's a televised event. Same goes for basketball courts. Anything that's inside is going to have low lux of light. And when they tried it with the Finnish pro hockey players, they found that their psychomotor speed, which is reaction time, that sped up. That was improved. So, of course, my brain's starting to spin, and I'm going, on those cloudy days at a ski race, boy, if you could have something that just gives you a little bit of a boost, it's huge. So, and I just had an athlete on a week ago do a video testimonial for us, and he was using the human charger all winter long. And these guys now are flying back and forth from the US to Europe way more frequently than we used to do back in the day. And, he said, first of all, jet lag, it's a given. It's a game changer. Just completely changed our world. And but he said on those cloudy days, I would use it between runs. I would use it, 30 minutes before the second run, just to get a little bit extra cortisol activated in my internal clock, my circadian rhythm. And he said it made a difference. Completely made a difference. So,
Wow.
and all this is, the human charger, the original one that came out had music in it. It was built like an iPod.
Mhm.
New owners took over. They said, we don't need music. It only runs for 12 minutes and then it shuts off automatically.
Mhm.
Why waste? You got to you got to pay Bluetooth for licensing, and you've got to put speakers, and forget it. Let's make it affordable and everyone can use it. And it's the same lux of light
Mhm.
that you would have in a sad lamp. So, and
So, something just came to mind. Obviously, the use for just anyone, everyday person, amazing, balances your circadian rhythm, gets you back on track. The benefits in specialty situations, the jet lag that you mentioned, again, our bodies weren't designed to travel across multiple time zones in such a short amount of time. So helping with that. Seasonal affective disorder, helping with that. And then boosting athletic performance, something that you're acutely aware of as far as the importance of every little fractional difference, gain that can be squeezed out of that. But I was also wondering, have you guys looked into using this with blind people? Because I know that a lot of times people that are blind struggle with sleep and things because they don't naturally get that in through their eyes.
wow, that's a new one. I haven't heard that one before.
That just kind of popped into my brain, and I don't know what the science would be behind that, but it was just a little ding that went off there.
Yeah, I gotta write that one down. No, but I'll tell you one of the one category that I think, obviously jet lag is big, SAD is big, but the SAD is really primarily your September through March sort of time.
Right.
Okay. I think the real biggie is shift work, and they call it
Mm,
social jet lag, and it's shift workers. And 40, 50 years ago, you didn't have that many shift workers. People kept pretty normal hours. Now you've got, between the warehouses and the manufacturing facilities and night traders, the financial markets. I ran one of the athletes that uses our product. His parents were over here in Garmisch this last winter, and he's a night trader in Boston. And
mhm.
he works from he goes to work at 9 o'clock in the evening and works till 5 in the morning. And he
Wow.
said, I know it's not good for me. It's not healthy.
Yeah.
Bodies, they're just not made for working at night when you should be sleeping.
Mhm.
And, I've been doing it long enough. So I kind of have I've got a schedule. I get back from work and at 6 o'clock and I work out then. I get my exercise and then I go to bed. But so we sent him a couple units for him and one of his coworkers to do some testing. I haven't heard back from him yet, but shift workers, if you look at, and I might have sent you an article on shift work, but it's pretty staggering the health issues that shift workers face having to work on the opposite side of the clock. I think that's where it could really have an impact because like jet lag, all you have to do is use it for the first night or two, various times, right? Just like you would if you landed it in Europe and you'd use it at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and maybe even 4 o'clock. You use it 4 or 5 times. It's constantly resetting your circadian rhythm. Then you sleep well that night. Do it the next day, makes it even better. If you're a shift worker, you'd go to work at 9 o'clock and you'd use it at 11 and 1 and 3 and maybe 5, but you wouldn't have to. And you drive home and you go to bed and it will reset. It will put you on a different schedule.
Mhm.
Okay. And then on the weekends, you just go do in reverse. And you got to use it 4 or 5 times during the day, the first day at least on a Saturday. And then Sunday's usually pretty good. But that's really helping your body run optimal. It's really interesting. It's strange, but it really works and it works well.
For shift workers and then for people with jet lag, which is typically a more sort of shorter time that they're dealing with that, you have a very specific kind of protocol that you recommend to help them be as effective as possible through that. But then there's also another thing that you brought up called social jet lag, which really is kind of different than traveling or even a shift worker. It can just be any of us, all of us who are kind of experiencing this because just the normal deadlines and the way we live now is pushed a little bit beyond the limits of what our bodies are designed to do. So that can be something that's beneficial for someone in that situation as well. And that includes a lot of us.
It does. We look at social jet lag really as shift work more than anything.
Hmm.
But what you're talking about is pretty common. I mean, we have coaches here in Europe that they'll be on the mountain for 4 or 5 hours out in the cold working hard, and then they get in a van. They got to drive back to their home base, and they're tired and they're
Hmm.
starting to get punchy in the car. So
Hmm.
you either pull over and get a espresso or you get a Red Bull and try to get some sort of, but that has its consequences too, because you'll get a crash,
Right.
you'll get a caffeine crash. They're using the human charger. So, and my wife who, she does a double dose of the human charger in the morning
Hmm.
and then she always uses it about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
They'll pick me up.
Yeah, just a little pick me up. And it's nice because it's holistic, which is huge. And it's maybe a good time to bring up the fact that because it's holistic, okay, for athletes,
You don't have to worry about any testing or
you don't worry about the testing because, in and I don't know if you'd have to ask your husband about I can't remember if they're even testing in the NFL players anymore. I think they were for a while, but in the classic case of ski racing and bike racing and things like that, they test them.
right.
Tennis, they test them. If you're on the podium, you're going to pee in a cup. That's
Hmm.
just the way it is. And if something comes back negative, you don't get awarded whatever you've won. That's just the way it is. And probably the most recent example of that was the Polish tennis player Iga Swiatek. She's number 3 in the world, and she took some melatonin, and it was tainted. Wasn't her
Oh.
fault,
Hmm.
but she had to hire her attorneys. They had to fight it with the World Anti-Doping Association, and they wanted to sanction her. And it's a problem.
Why do you think something as effective as this stayed hidden in Europe for so long? And have there been any challenges that you faced bringing this to the US?
Yeah, it's a great question. Sometimes I look and I think about it and I go, why? But then having spent so much time here and growing up in the States, there are quite a few things here that never made it back over the pond
Hmm.
and that are really pretty beneficial. Um, Americans are Americans have always kind of felt like we live on an island and we're the best and we're this and that, and in some sectors, the Europeans are way ahead. Just quality of food, for example. We talked about that. But yeah, it's a you know it, it's a strange thing. But then again, the two guys, the first company that had the human charger, the guys from Nokia, they weren't very good marketers. They were great scientists, but they were lousy marketers. And they sold quite a few of these things in Europe. And then, the new owners obviously want to expand this. And I think to a certain degree, us, whether it's Americans or even anybody in the world, I think, kind of got caught with our pants down when this whole tech revolution came. It came
Mhm.
so fast. It's like these things blew up, right? And everyone's using technology. They're using laptop computers and then you have the personal phones and now it's AI and all this is coming at us so fast. We don't think about our bodies. We're just
Mhm.
trying to keep up by maybe eating a little bit better or trying to get a little exercise, and there's not enough of that going on, sadly, in America. But I think we've just been caught, and now people are going. So I'll give you an example. The sad lamp market,
Mhm.
5 to $600 million a year globally. So this means that people are they're looking for an answer. How can I feel better during the winter months, which is half the year?
Mhm.
And they're buying a lamp because they don't know any better.
They don't know the other options out there.
You know,
When did you get involved with Human Charger? How long ago was that?
it was about a year and a half ago.
Year and a half?
Yeah,
What would you say has been the biggest challenge so far th from the business?
educating people.
Mm.
That's been the toughest. We're always a little bit skeptical, I guess, and I attribute it to our society, American society. We're Americans are huge on convenience,
Yes.
right? I mean, it's so easy to go down to the convenience store and buy a bottle of 300 Tylenols
Mhm.
or ibuprofens or whatever. You can't get that over here. You can't buy any of that stuff in a convenience store, a grocery store, a gas station. None of it. It all has to go through the pharmacy. And the most you'll ever get, you walk in and you say, I want 400 milligram tablets of ibuprofen. You'll get a box of 20. That's it. And pharmacies are closed part of Saturday and all of Sunday. So, but people over here are more accustomed to moving. They're out walking and hiking and biking and doing all these things that really help you feel better. You don't always need to reach for medications. So and when we started looking into the jet lag thing in the human charger, we saw other people out there marketing kits where they'd have eye shades and orange glasses and then melatonin, right? So it's always looking for the quick fix. Not to say that this isn't. This is a pretty quick fix for certain things. But I think people just don't. The education process has really been a challenge because people are like, really? That'll work? Because most people don't understand the human body and light. And, we've always, like you said before, we've always woken up with the sun, gone to bed when it got dark. And you never think of what affects it.
Mhm.
This is what light affects it.
Yeah, I feel sadly that over here we are like a pill for everything type mentality, and medication becomes our default, and skepticism comes around things that are more natural, unfortunately, for us here. So I can understand why education would be probably your biggest challenge for Americans.
Now, the good thing is that the wellness business, the wellness industry is really growing fast.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
So
God.
glad for that. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think some of that is healthcare. I think people, you start looking at how expensive healthcare is in America today,
Mhm.
and a lot of people can't afford it. And there's a lot that they can do with light therapy and movement to feel a lot better.
Uh,
And I think that, maybe they're being forced into it a little bit just because they can't afford anything else. But yeah, it's a tough
Sometimes
one.
that's the driver, money motivated, but if it gets you to the right place,
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
that's a good thing. Yeah, it's been nice to see, I feel like over the past few years, much more of an awareness of getting back to these things that are so simple and basic and can really be the foundation and steering away from always looking for the pill for the fix because that just usually typically masks the symptoms and doesn't address actually the root cause of what's happening or make that change at a more fundamental level. So let's talk about some of the things that you're excited about for the future. A couple things. First, let's talk about the human charger, what you're excited about for that, and how you sort of see that coming and projecting into the next few years.
Yeah, we want more and more people to
Mm-hmm.
start using it. And it is a little bit of a challenge because we don't have a lot of money to go out and advertise. And even in advertising, I don't think people would really understand it truly. So we're being a little bit unorthodox with our marketing. We're trying to get it on as many people as we can.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking to a PR firm out of 2 days ago, and we want to get it into the hands of some celebrities that travel a lot, and people that have influence, including influencers. We're going to do more with TikTok influencers because they do have a huge impact today on people that are buying things. It's not the kind of product that can easily sit on a shelf in a retail store because someone would look at it and go, they
What's
wouldn't know
this?
what it is.
Right.
Right? So it's kind of we had to be really we got to think on the left side a little bit, just unorthodox. We've got to
Mhm.
try to find ways to get it into people's hands so that they can talk about it and get it out to people. And once that starts to spread and more people become aware of it, it'll become one of the next things
Mhm.
because people are struggling. I've got a friend who is on a school board in Denver, and he said 80% of the kids are depressed. He said it's sad. They're and obviously social media is a big contributor to that. But it's blue light devices and it's social media and all of it's come so fast. Kid can't be a normal kid anymore.
Mhm.
And so I think it's just a matter of getting more and more people on it. And, thanks to people like you that have a podcast like this, I mean, that's helping spread the word.
One of the other things that you're working on is a book, a couple of books. So
Couple
one, I think you said you're kind of in the final editing phases of it, correct? The one on pain. So tell us all a little bit about that one. And then
Ye
also what you've got lined up for the next book.
Yeah, I've got, listen, if you've been as lucky as I have to have traveled the world and done all these kind of wild and wacky things,
Life
you
of a
know
Thousand Kings,
yeah,
Gary.
yeah, Life of a Thousand Kings.
Uh-huh.
I don't wanna go off to the happy hunting grounds without getting rid of it all, okay?
Mhm.
I wanna get rid of it. I wanna get it out of my head, get it down. If it helps people, I'm thrilled to death. I'd rather go out with a smile on my face knowing that I did something good for other people. So, you get to a certain point, and it's like, do you need to always be worried about money and trying to make money, and I want people to be happy. I want to be able to contribute. So I'm doing a couple things, and books is one of them. This book on pain kind of came out of the blue a little bit because when we first came over to Europe, we watched a Netflix special on Purdue Pharma where it was Oxycontin. Oh my God. And I sat there just like, what? And God's green earth would force people to take that kind of a heavy narcotic continuously for pain. So I couldn't wrap my head around it. And about, I don't know, 3 or 4 days after that, I met a gentleman in a town, a friend of mine in a different town. And I sat down with him and I told him about this. He's an American that's living over here. And he said, I was hooked on it. I said, you're kidding. And he goes, no. He said, it's horrible. He said, the best day on Oxycontin is the first day.
Mm.
Everything after that is downhill. And he said, I got to the point where I became stupid. I couldn't drive. I couldn't articulate anything. And I had to get some help to get me off of it. He said it was really bad. And he had back problems. It's a classic case of, you have back problems. Well, the best way that you can fix your back, and I've got like one disc that they took out and I got the one below. It's not too happy, but I keep it in check because I keep my core really strong.
Right.
So I exercise my core almost every day. And I thought to myself, what is this fascination with pills? So I thought I'd write a book. about pain. And because in my sport of ski racing, bloody hell, man, that was a painful sport. I mean, people that are skiers that have gone out and crashed, they'll tell you how painful it is. And you do
Right.
it, you do it repeatedly a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And back in my day, we didn't have the padding that they have today or the
Mm-hmm.
breakaway gates that they're skiing around. Back then it was bamboo and we were in normal clothing. So we spent the entire winter from our arms and our thighs on the outside of our thighs were black and blue all winter long. In fact, today I still have no feeling on the outside of my thighs.
Wow.
There's so much nerve damage that was done. So, and I'm thinking, well, we got through all this, and of course, cold. I mean, the Midwest is bloody cold, and it was really cold back in those days, especially in the UP.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm thinking, we got through this. Why are these guys taking all this medication? So it was a chance to sort of, dive into the history of it a little bit, what our ancestors did in Scandinavia, the Vikings, how they managed it. And my grandfather, who had polio when he was 12, and this was in the early 1900s. So he went to they call it a sanatorium down in Cleveland, Ohio. And literally they couldn't give them morphine or anything like that. They had morphine there, but they didn't want to use it on kids. But they put him in a rack to try to straighten his legs. I mean, this is torture. He spent 9 months trying to get his really bad leg.
Mm-hmm.
And he, and he was tough, but those were so, I use that as an example, and I use my ski racing career and some of the things that I've been through, and I didn't have to take a lot of medication to get through that. And I'm a lot older now, and I don't need to go into a gym and lift weights. I do everything as body weight. But you can exercise for 45 minutes to an hour every single day just using body weight, and you will not have achy joints. I can't remember the last time I took an ibuprofen.
That's great, especially considering the wear and tear you've put on your body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Like
and
you said.
I have less issues with my knee that doesn't have any cartilage. My right knee doesn't have any cartilage anymore. My back, once in a while it gets a little flaky, and sometimes getting in and out of the car it's a little dicey because I got that nerve pain back there. But for the
Mm-hmm.
most part, it's fine, and I can just I can go without it. And great. So that's and that's I'm trying to finalize that and get it out.
You have a date
It's
in
got the
mind, a rough date in mind when you hope to have that published?
No, it'll be this year.
Okay.
There's kind of a process. You've got to have it edited, and then you've got to have a copywriter do it, and then you've got to make sure that there aren't any mistakes. Then I got to have a cover designed, and AI has been great. It's guiding me through the process, and then I have to have some people read it and give some testimonials, and then I'll self-publish it on Amazon, and it's being my cheeky self, I've got a funky title for it. It's called "Don't Be Such a Wuss," so that I want people to take a look at it and go, "Huh? What?"
What? Yeah.
And then I'd really like to do a book. I've got enough material to do a book on to help coaches, because I've seen a lot of coaches over the years that don't know how to coach kids, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know the difference between coaching guys and gals. And that's really important, and the little secrets, the little things that they don't know about. And I think the coaching world needs that. They need that. It's not an easy profession to just walk into. It takes a lot, and there'll be, obviously it's fun because I put a lot of stories in it, so that
Mm-hmm.
they have some references, and then obviously an autobiography at some point just of my life, so my kids have something to reference when they'll give them something to laugh about when I'm pushing daisies somewhere.
Do they
But
ask you questions now about your life and things? It is one of the regrets I have. My dad was he was 50 when I was born, so he was older. And then I was so busy raising a young family, I didn't really think to ask him questions, that much about his life. And it's probably the one regret I have is that I didn't ask him more about his life before he passed away. Because he grew up as a child of the Depression. So if he were alive, he'd be 108 at this point. And the stories that I'm now finding out through the other cousins, I think, gosh darn, I wish I would have just asked him and gotten the real firsthand version too, of things. So do your kids ask you things, or when you start to share, are they open to it, or? they're busy living their own lives right now and it's not the focus.
Yeah, they're in the 20s, right? And
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
when you hit 20 as a kid, you go out and find these little corks and you stick
Yeah,
them in your ears because
yeah,
you don't wanna listen to your parents with anything. They have absolutely no clue. I mean, I've told stories and here and there a little bit, but I had the same experience as you. I mean, I would love to have known more about my grandfather, and I
mhm,
was really close to him, and I know quite a bit about him, but I wish I knew more.
mhm,
And my parents, I wish I'd have known more about my mother. I think more than anybody, because she was my rock. She was the one that was always, man. If I needed something, I'd go to mom.
mhm.
Dad wasn't. He was a little bit different. And we were close when he was my coach as a young kid, but then he had a really brutal midlife crisis, tore the family apart. But my mother was. I wish I would have known more about my mother, and yeah, I just want to leave my kids with something that they can read and kind of get a few laughs and go, "Oh my god, I never knew he did that."
Hear that about dad.
I mean, some of the people I've met, Beth, in my
Oh,
lifetime,
I can imagine. I can only imagine.
God, it's
Yeah,
just
I can only imagine. And look, it's not over yet. You're just, on act 4 or 5 here, but I feel like you're maybe a 10-act play or something, so
I'm just getting started. Just
much
getting
more to
started.
go. So I always kind of bring it back to AI, obviously, because that's what we do at Soaring Solutions, provide solutions, AI solutions for people, anyone in the health and wellness space, whether you're a practitioner, where you have a clinic, whether you're something in the more in the health and wellness space like you guys are. But tell us a little bit about how you currently use AI, if you do, in your business at this point.
Yeah, thank God for AI because, fortunately, I started using it almost 2 years ago.
Mhm.
So, and one of the things you really learn is how to prompt.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to feed it the right information, and it's not a tell all. And I'll kick it in the teeth if I have to. I'll bite back if they come up with something I don't think is right. And but it's really cool because, as just 2 small entrepreneurs, I mean, we don't have the bandwidth to hire a bunch of people. And I think in this day and age, I just don't wanna bite off having a big company. I just don't,
Mhm.
you know? I think we can do this a different way, and I've always fortunately, I've always been really tech forward.
Mhm.
I try to stay up with it quite a bit, and for me, it's the world's greatest assistant, because they don't sass you. They don't demand raise every 6 months.
That's right.
It's really interesting, and no, I've been using it quite a bit. Use it to help proof my books. I use it to every day. And today I'm continuing to work on our new Shopify website, and it helps me with that.
Mhm.
And it's pretty spot on. I mean, it
Mhm.
keeps getting better and better and better and better. My Substack articles that I publish every week, it helps me sort of organize things a little bit. I tried once to have it write an article for me, and I was like, ooh, no, that's not me. So I got to have my flavor, but it will check. It will check to make sure that something isn't correct.
Mhm.
And now with images, my wife used to do, God, she would labor over Canva to do an image and put some text on it. And all I have to do is tell AI what I need and they come up with it. Now I will do some of that. I could throw it into iPhoto and throw some text on it and that's it.
Mhm.
But it's really good. It's clever. And I think there's a big opportunity with AI. I've had a lot of people come at me with, "Oh, we can do lead generation and all this sort of stuff." And I'm like, okay, but show me a case study where lead generation can get me into a place to sell the human charger, which they
Mhm.
haven't been able to do. And they want a lot of money up front to do that. But I think there's a way somehow. I mean, you're in the health and wellness space, and it's like, how can we get it into a clinic that would really embrace this?
Well, I think that, you said education is key in
Mhm.
particular. So it's about finding those people who make those decisions and sending them the right education. But there is a way for AI to do that. Absolutely. To start that conversation for you. If there was, I wanted to kind of go back to images because I had a conversation with a guy the other day on a podcast, and he was talking about how when he started his company, he sat down at the table with a set of colored pencils and paper and created his logo and then used that and had a graphic designer, and then they tweaked it and tweaked it. And, now you would just sit down with a prompt and say, hey, I want this and this and this. And then it spits something back and you might keep refining it. But what took a whole Sunday afternoon now can be done in the matter of minutes. And so the efficiency, and it oftentimes can create something beyond what we would even come up with in our own brains. So
Yeah.
it is truly amazing. But if there was some other part of your business that you could hand off right now to AI that you would love to take off your plate, what do you think that would be?
I think as an assistant right now, because we're in such a discovery phase, we really want to try to find which sectors are the best. We
Uh-huh.
we started a little bit on the medical side, but medical's kind of weird, This is a unique device because it doesn't need to be certified by the FDA. It doesn't really classify itself as a medical device. So sometimes medical clinics, well, if it's not a medical device, we don't want to use it, or it's really designed more for a wellness
Mhm.
space. So I guess it's being able to really have a roadmap of how to get it into that a little bit more onto the wellness side.
Mhm.
And of course it's hard to get to the right people, the right decision makers. That's tricky, because I think for a product like this to go into to an airline for business and first class travelers is ideal. They have these amenity kits that have stuff, right?
Mhm.
But a lot of that stuff isn't really applicable to what you would use when you land. I mean, this thing can change people's lives because
Mhm.
if most people that take a vacation to Europe, they take it for a week or maybe 10 days. And if you feel like crap for 3 days,
Right. That's a
you've
big chunk
lost.
of your time.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
big chunk of your time, and you spend a lot of money to get over there, and it's like, so
Mhm.
we're looking at things like that are maybe even in the fitness realm to help people understand that in order to really benefit from a workout, you need to use something like this. It's a great add-on product for people like that. They could buy it at wholesale and resell it.
Mhm.
So I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's we're still a little bit in the discovery. We're trying to figure out where it really would have the most impact. There are a lot of people that work in big companies under not so great light, and these companies will spend a lot of money to put in a little fitness facility or some a fitness room or a gym or something, and they'll maybe put in a snack bar or cafe or something, but they're under terrible light,
Mhm.
and that's having more of an impact on their performance and the way they are than anything else. If you're chained to a desk for 8 hours and in crappy light, it's not great.
Mhm. And I could see the impact on that for, like you said, in all those situations. I'm also thinking particularly to like in hospitals where people are working the night shift. I mean, if there's anyone that you want top of their game, it's someone in the hospitals. Particularly, I was a med device rep for a while in the trauma OR. And so, if you're doing a trauma surgery at 2 a.m., which can happen because it's trauma, um, boy, you want everyone wide awake and fully dialed in during that time, and those lights are horrible in hospitals.
Beth, if you could solve that riddle for me, you'll be my hero, because that was early on our list. And
Mm,
the biggest problem is that so many of these hospitals now have become mega entities.
mhm,
They've been bought up. The smaller ones get bought up by some of the bigger groups,
yep,
and you can't get to anybody that's a
mhm,
decision maker. And um, my sister is a med tech in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, and she works for a dermatologist, and of course all her coworkers are like, why do you come in so happy every day? And she goes, because I use this and I'm wide awake. And she's even given them a discount code, but they don't bother with it, and it's crazy. And it's like,
yeah,
do you want to suffer?
yeah,
But you know it's hard because and that profession, this profession, they're some of the most unhealthy people,
Yes, it's so
you know?
true. It is so,
They're
so, so
pale, they're overweight, they're working their tails off. I mean, God love them, because if it wasn't for them, you know, be a scary ordeal.
Yep.
But they're not being, and of course, the bigger the company, the bigger the group, the more
Mhm.
the bottom line they're looking at. They don't wanna spend the money on it, and they don't care about the employees. And I think it's one of the things that's been it's probably one of the biggest shockers, seeing the way the medical profession works in Germany versus the US, night and day.
Night and day.
Absolutely night and day. They take care of their employees here. Doesn't
Mhm.
matter what business you're in. The employees are taken care of, and obviously the healthcare system is phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal.
Well, we have a thing or 2 to learn over here about that. We're very slow to adapt, and that's a conversation that we could have a whole other podcast about.
Yeah.
Maybe we will one day. Our resistance to change, but, I feel like people are, through products like yours and other things, taking back control, getting back to the roots of health, truly starting to feel their best again by just paying attention to what our body actually needs. And if we really listen to that, we can solve most of the problems. Like, I am so happy if I break a bone or get into an accident or have some sort of horrible illness, that we have the healthcare system that we have over here. But there are so many places where our just day-to-day chronic health is falling between the cracks, and just paying attention and utilizing these little tools. The world is what it is. We're not going to get rid of cell phones. We're not going to get rid of blue light. This is what we're dealing with. So how can we help ourselves in this environment do the best? And as I mentioned to you earlier in the podcast, I know that getting outside first thing in the morning is a great thing to do. I just don't always do it for whatever reason, whether it's too cold or I've got to hit the road running, the first thing in the morning. So even when people do know, it's not always easy. So when you put something like this in the hands of people
Mhm.
where you can do something holistic, there's no negative side effects that I'm aware of. It's very, very affordable. It just seems like it's a real game changer. And like I said, my sleep scores have been so much better since I started using this, which, as we know, sleep is the foundation. So it's really about getting back to that. So I appreciate that. So I thank you for that myself. And speaking of the affordability, I want to also just say all of your contact information will be in the show notes, all of your links. But you do have a special offer for any of the listeners or people maybe who are viewing and watching the podcast on YouTube. And what is that you're going to do for them?
Yeah, so the human charger is, we believe, affordably priced at $179. It's really simple. It's very sturdy. It's got a little lithium ion battery in there, and one charge, I don't know what you found, but one charge you'll usually last 3 to 4 weeks.
Mhm.
And we rarely ever get a device back. So we've got people out there, or the human charger company has had people out there that have had it for 6 or 7 years and never had an issue with it. So it's
Wow.
affordably priced, but for your listeners, we're doing a $20 off, so it'll be $159, and we'll do a code. It's Beth20, Beth all capital letters and 20, and then yeah, so they can and they would basically go on our website, which is humanchargerusa.com. There is a humancharger.com, but
Mhm.
that is the European website, and they can't ship to the
To
US. Yeah.
Okay, great. And, this is something that you could purchase one and your whole family can use as well too. Like, can be passing it around. So,
You
becomes
can.
it becomes even more affordable if that's really, an obstacle for someone, but it's great to have, like, my guy travels a lot, so I want him to have his own because I don't want him to take mine if he's going somewhere. And since he does travel a lot, it's gonna be great for him for that jet lag because he does a lot of, like, 3-day, 2-day across the country sort of thing. So,
Really?
yeah,
Okay.
helping him stay on track and, not have to make that time zone jump, especially if he's going East Coast to West Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to we'll make sure that he gets one, because I would like to have, see if he can help us with some of those types of connections, in his world. We were fortunate last year to have a dozen of the 49ers player using it uh, because now the NFL wants 16 games overseas in 5 years.
Right.
You know, that's a lot. That's a lot of travel, and these guys need it. You know,
Mhm.
so whatever
Well,
we can do to
Gary,
help.
this has been such an interesting conversation. Your life has truly been fascinating. Thank you for sharing that with me and all of the listeners and viewers today. I'm very excited to see the impact that the human charger is going to continue to have as more and more people find out about it. Just such a simple, easy way to make a big, big change. Excited for your books to come out as well. We'll be keeping an eye out for that. Thank you for your generosity for the discount code. I hope everyone will get their hands on it. And we're just all excited to see, where Acts 7, 8, and 9 lead for Gary Miller in
Well,
this
thank you
life.
very much, Beth, for having me on. I mean, this is a big treat. I like doing these things. So
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
thank you. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye.